April 20th, 2020 Observer Newsletter. WWE cuts staff. XFL folds. Death of Howard Finkel. By Observer staff. April 20th, 2020. An absolutely crazy week saw Vince McMahon fold the XFL, have the governor of Florida overrule local officials to be able to run multiple shows a week in the state, yet, along with Dana White, to be mentioned by President Trump as one of the people he'd talk with about reopening the economy, and then made massive talent and office cuts with the expectation of a long economic downturn. With its $500 million of reserve cash available, broken down as $90.45 million in straight cash on hand, $160.03 million in short-term investments that can be used, and another $250 million available instantly in debt capacity, McMahon was the first promoter in combat sports to make cuts. While other companies have avoided doing so, even though all others are losing money, although UFC will be back to making money as soon as they start running shows again. The decision to fold the XFL seemed to come on April 9th and was announced the next day. WWE had planned to tape 5 weeks of Raw, SmackDown and NXT between April 10th and April 13th, taping at both the Performance Center and Full Sail University. Either during or right after the taping of the first show, a scheduled SmackDown event on April 10th, McMahon had a sudden about-face. He decreed at that point that all shows from this point forward would go live. That meant people who thought they would get the tapings done and those who wanted to quarantine after to be safe for their families suddenly found out there is no quarantine time at all, because there are no 14-day gaps between tapings, at least if you are a regular top name. Production people would either be flying multiple times a week to Florida, or be stationed there. The decision was made due to the fear that NBC Universal and/or Fox would try and opt out of the price of the respective television deals, since the contract for Raw, and the belief is for SmackDown as well, only allowed for limited, 3 in the case of Raw, taped shows per year. After running taped shows for 2 weeks, they were close to their limit. Both NBC Universal and Fox were quiet, not responding to any questions regarding WWE. It is not known if there was direct communication about not running live, although it's hard to believe in a pandemic, and with WWE's value particularly to NBC Universal, that they would do anything to jeopardize the deal. But everyone's finances are troublesome. It could be McMahon just making sure there is no excuse, but those who were told the reason for his quick change of plans were told it was due to trying to avert the networks changing his deal. Those 2 deals, along with much lesser international deals and the WWE network, are going to be what carries the company over the short term, with revenue streams like house show revenue shut down, and thus merchandise also down, and expected large declines in licensing, advertising, and certainly the second Saudi Arabian show this year in jeopardy. The cuts on April 15th culminated a week where there was seemingly a gigantic story every day that got forgotten as the next day took place. The first was McMahon's decision in the middle of tapings to go weekly. It immediately brought up questions as to how, in a shutdown throughout the state of Florida, WWE would be allowed, particularly since twice in March country officials had gone to the tapings and questioned them happening and told them they were going to have to shut down, which is why they taped several weeks of shows, as well as WrestleMania, in advance. When Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings ordered a countywide shutdown, before the state mandated it had included wrestling, which is why they taped television and WrestleMania so far in advance. When they were about to come back, there were those in local government who questioned it, but the word came from Gov. Ron DeSantis to allow them and told him that WWE was considered an essential business. The idea was so preposterous that DeSantis, and the entire Florida state government, became something of a laughingstock to the national media, portrayed more as corrupt than anything, tying in Linda McMahon's promise to spend millions for Trump's re-election in the state and DeSantis allowing Vince McMahon to run as often as he wanted during a shutdown came on the same day. This led to national news coverage making fun of that decision, because of how preposterous it really was. Originally they were not deemed an essential business, said Demings when asked about it at a press meeting on April 13th. With some conversation from the governor's office regarding the governor's statewide order, they were deemed an essential business. By the time this came out, it was 2 days after Fightful.com and Sean Sapp had broken the story that WWE sent out an internal memo to its talent regarding what was believed to be the first COVID-19 positive in the U.S. pro wrestling industry. Demings was asked about the positive regarding questions why they would be allowed to continue under those circumstances. Demings said that he knew about the positive, but said that WWE was like a family, a line that aged very poorly over the next few days, and that they police themselves. This is the timeline. WWE had early in the week planned to tape 5 episodes of Raw, SmackDown and NXT early this past week. SmackDown was to be taped April 10th and April 11th. Raw was to be taped April 12th and April 13th. NXT would be taped that weekend at Full Sail University. In theory, this was illegal, as the county was shut down. So even though the actual order allowing them to tape didn't come until April 9th, clearly McMahon, and others in the company who told me they were taping and somehow the shutdown wouldn't apply to them, already knew it would be okay. On April 9th, Linda McMahon announced that her super PAC looking to re-elect Donald Trump would spend $11 million in Orlando and $7.5 million in Tampa. Later that day, DeSantis issued an order that gave not just WWE, but any sport that was going to be broadcast on national television, freedom to run in Florida as an essential business, as long as there were no spectators in attendance. This came just days after the Association of Ringside Professionals had said that no show should take place due to a number of risks. When asked how WWE possibly fit into the description of an essential service, DeSantis said that such events were crucial to the Florida economy. Of course, that makes no sense at all. Empty arena sports have virtually no economic impact on the economy. Aside from rent money for the venue, which is not that significant, the usual economic impact, taxes on ticket money and souvenirs, and impact on restaurants in the area or hotels for travelers that you do get from major sports events are no longer applicable for shows with no fans in attendance. Florida does get tax money from tickets to boxing and MMA events, but they don't even get that from pro wrestling, and there is no ticket money to tax for anyone right now. It is certainly expected that Tampa will get WrestleMania in 2022, and they also wanted to make sure the state was okay for Major League Baseball in the event the league goes through with the proposal to do months if not the entire season in Florida and Arizona. Jared Moskowitz, the state coordinating officer of the state of Florida's Division of Emergency Management, in a memo on April 9 listed essential services additions as 1. Employees and programs addressing mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence and other urgent counseling, so long as these services may be offered within social distancing guidelines. 2. Employees at theme parks and entertainment complexes, zoological parks and facilities and aquarium facilities now closed to the public who are necessary to ensure the health, safety and security of persons, animals and property, preserving plant property and equipment, maintaining regulatory compliance and processing payroll and benefits, and other activities necessary to preserve and maintain animals and facilities. And 3. Employees at a professional sports and media production with a national audience, including any athletes, entertainers, production team, executive team, media team and any others necessary to facilitate, including services supporting such productions only if the location is closed to the general public. The order didn't include even any compliances to social distancing as the mental health care workers had, or limit the size of gatherings. Basically, they are free to as they please so long as the event is broadcast on national television. DeSantis became a media laughingstock when this came out, largely due to categorizing WWE events as essential services, and then it became more ugly when reporters tied the Linda McMahon money spent coming the day of the order. Of course, DeSantis denied one had nothing to do with the other. During a news conference on April 14, DeSantis was asked to explain. "I think people are chomping at the bit," he said. "I mean, if you think about it, we've never had a period like this in modern American history where you had such little new content, particularly in the sporting realm. I mean, people are watching, we're watching, like, reruns from the early 2000s, watching Tom Brady do the Super Bowl then, which is neat because he's going to be in Tampa, and I think they have a chance to win a Super Bowl this year. But I think people, to be able to have some light at the tunnel, see that things may get back on a better course, I think from just a psychological perspective, I think is a good thing." WWE released a statement saying, "We believe it is now more important than ever to provide people with a diversion from these hard times. We are producing content on a closed set with only essential personnel in attendance following appropriate guidelines while taking additional precautions to ensure the health and wellness of our performers and staff." As a brand that has been woven into the fabric of society, WWE and its superstars bring families together and deliver a sense of hope, determination and perseverance. There are a few issues with this. For one, the appearance of Jerry Lawler on Raw standing right next to Tom Phillips and Byron Saxton on the broadcast was beyond concerning. Lawler flew in for the tapings from Memphis. He's 70 years old, which is a high-risk age group, and people with prior heart conditions. Lawler had a nearly fatal heart attack and his family has a history with heart issues. There was no need for a third announcer, and certainly Lawler being there even if there was only one or two announcers was, according to every doctor we've spoken with, a terrible lack of judgment from the company. The strange part is that the prior tapings, they had decided not to allow Lawler to come. Lawler was said to have requested working the show, but that should hardly be Lawler's decision. Essential personnel also included a hairstylist, because, after all, this is a cosmetic business. The green light has led other sports to try and run in Florida. Hindsight will tell if this was a good move or not, but doctors we've spoken to believe the risk is not small of either pro wrestling or MMA running events at this time. AEW will likely not come back until May 23, although nothing is certain and ratings concerns could also impact decision-making. Running in Florida is an option. Impact is taped for several months and has no need to run, but we're able to run in a shutdown Tennessee on the guise that they were a media company and that media is allowed to do their jobs. Ring of Honor and MLW have both said they will not run shows at this time, even though MLW started in Orlando at Guild Nightclub and has talked that when things are safe, that would be a venue they would consider running regularly because of the feeling it may take time to where people are comfortable at attending live events, so a small club may be the best thing for the company. No, I will not put my athletes, crew and staff along with their families at risk of contracting the virus, said Court Bauer. Straight up, we won't be promoting live events, empty or arena or with fans, until this thing looks like it is under control and there is a treatment, vaccine or way to ensure we're not putting fans, wrestlers, crew, etc. at risk. We are digitizing the 2002-04 MLW Underground TV series library and along with a few shows that predate our start on TV, we have easily 50 episodes. Add in some best of themed episodes and we can get to about 60 to 65 weeks. My hunch is this thing could go until next spring. If so, we should be fine. We may also do some other stuff with Vine like a talk show with our current talent appearing like ESPN is doing with their morning programming. So no Fight Island for us. Ring of Honor's Joe Koff told Post Wrestling, I think it's great for WWE that they are able to operate how they see fit, or how they may even need to for their business. It doesn't necessarily change our approach to the pandemic though. The safety of all our performers, staff, vendors, and fans are the most important thing to us right now, and we are continuing to improve our infrastructure and find ways to connect with them during this time. Are we eager to get back? Absolutely. For now, we will be monitoring day by day. Sean Sapp got a hold of a memo to talent from last week from Paul Levesque, which stated, "We have just been notified that, name not reported but talent was told the name, was diagnosed with COVID-19. WWE doctor spoke with the infected individual this morning and reported last had contact with anyone at WWE on March 26 at the Performance Center. As you know, he infected individual is not an in-ring performer and we believe this matter is low risk to you per the following chronology." The story did not list the chronology past stating the person who tested positive came after the person and their roommate showed symptoms and that this person had been socializing with two friends who worked in the healthcare industry. The memo continued that those of you who were potentially exposed would be cleared for travel by the evening of Thursday, April 9 at the latest, since the last possible exposure to any WWE talent personnel should have been at least 14 days prior. The WWE then released a statement which had a notable contradiction. The Levesque memo lists that people who could have been exposed if they had showed no symptoms should be fine to travel to television. The person infected was a member of the broadcast team and was at times in close quarters with several people on the roster during the filming of WrestleMania. The public statement by WWE claimed the exposure was on the evening of March 26, after television production for WrestleMania was already completed, and that the employee had no contact with anyone from WWE since being exposed to those two individuals, were friends in the healthcare field, is dog well, and made a complete recovery. While not stated, the person in question has not returned to on-air work at press time. The lack of public reaction to the positive was notable, largely because the comedy regarding DeSantis trying to rationalize WWE as essential programming overwhelmed it as a story. At first the belief was that if somebody did test positive in WWE, that everyone in wrestling in the US would shut down because of the reaction to continuing. If it was in AEW, the belief is they would shut down but WWE would continue. As it turned out, it was in WWE, nobody batted an eye and WWE is now taping 3 days per week. WWE made massive cuts across every division, not just limited to on-air performers. In particular, the live event division was gutted since there will likely be no live events for some time to come. But writers and office workers were cut back heavily, and in many cases age was a factor, notably the surprise cutting of referee Mike Chioda, who had been in that role for 31 years, the longest-lasting referee in the company since its national expansion, who is 53 in a company that wants younger faces on the screen. With the release of the producers, it was both the older producers, Peter Gruner, Billy Kidman, 45, who has been with the company since WCW folded in 2001, Mike Rotunda, who is 62, Joseph Jones, Scott Armstrong, 58, and David Finlay, 62. The latter came as a surprise since Finlay has long been lauded as a great coach, often credited heavily with teaching a generation of women who were more models that knew nothing and shaped them into being wrestlers. Finlay had also been with the company since 2001 with the exception of a one-year firing over an issue at a house show. But the list also included Sarah Stock, the former Dark Angel in CMLL and Sarita in TNA, and more recent hires like Lance Evers, Lance Storm, Shane Helms, Patrick Buckridge, Pat Buck, and Sean Daivari. Storm, who is very highly regarded for his wrestling IQ, had 3 strikes against him, being 51, being from Canada at a time when it becomes difficult to come to the US and with everything based in Orlando, and being a recent hire. The producers were all put on furlough officially. It means that they were told they could be hired back, and some likely will be when house shows return, but that could be a long time. For the present time they will still get company benefits but no longer be paid. 3 recently hired NXT coaches were also let go: Serena Deeb, Chris Guy, better known as Ace Steel, and Tokumitsu Ishizawa, Kendo Kashin, a Japanese wrestler, amateur champion and MMA fighter. The main roster talent list let go were James Curtin, Drake Maverick, who was told he would be allowed to fulfill his scheduled matches in the Cruiserweight tournament before being let go, Brian Myers, Kurt Hawkins, Chad Allegra, Carl Anderson, Andrew Hankinson, Luke Gallows, Michael Hutter, EC3, Lionel Green, Leo Rush, Jeremy Fritz, Eric Young, Heath Miller, Heath Slater, Matt Rehwold, Aiden English, Kurt Angle, Sarah Dobson-Rowe, Sarah Logan, Joseph Rudd, Eric Rowan, Edwin Colin Primo, Orlando Colin, Epico, Mike Bennett, Mike Kanellis, Maria Kanellis Bennett, Maria Kanellis, Matt Cardona, Zack Ryder, Levi's Valenzuela, No Way Jose, and perhaps the biggest surprise, Miroslav Barnyashev, Rusev. Rusev was released just days after pledging a $20,000 donation for people in the company who weren't under contract that worked at arena shows that were shut down. He hadn't been used much of late and was involved in a contract dispute. His wife, Catherine Jo Perry, Lana, will not be cut. We were told as far as the main roster, that all of the cuts have been made. Of the names, the only ones being used at this time to any significant degree were Gallows and Anderson. They had just signed a 5-year deal at about $750,000 per year each. They had continually turned down lower numbers and has asked for their release, with the expectation they were going to leave for AEW. That's why they kept getting bigger offers until they agreed. Mike Kanellis was another who had just signed a 5-year deal after wanting out, and then after doing so and not being used, wanted out again. Leo Rush at one point also wanted out. English, Primo, Ebgo, Slater, Ryder, Hawkins, Young, EC3 and Jose were rarely used, and in some cases, never used. English was used only as a television announcer. In looking at the list, Anderson and Gallows would certainly have a shot at going to AEW, but with the Revival just being cut, it wouldn't make sense to bring both teams in at the same time. Anderson and Gallows would likely be welcomed back to New Japan as well. Leo Rush has the PWG background and super talent, and worked great matches around the world with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Rusev is a genuine star, although in AEW, they would have to give him a new name, which isn't hard, but he'll be deluged with Rusev Day chants. He'd be super over at first, and things could be worse. But he's a good enough wrestler to make it there. Ryder is very close friends with Cody and Brandy Rhodes, and I'd be surprised if he didn't push for him. Angle is notable. If he could still wrestle, everyone would want him, but he really looked hurting so badly on the way out. There are creative ways he could be used, but I'm not sure how to justify a big money offer, and a small money offer would be insulting. If the economy was better and he was gone, I do think he'd have offers from everyone just to be a television personality. All of the talent will be on non-competes until July 15th. For NXT, all the released names aren't known. And unlike the main roster, the belief is that there are more to come. We're told everyone who isn't featured heavily on NXT television is sweating on this. The NXT talent cut will only be on 30-day non-competes. The only confirmed names at press time are Deonna Purrazzo, Alexander Yakshić, NJ Jenkins, Dan Mata, ring announcer John Loquasto and interviewer Kat Marino aka Alyssa Marino. The timing, as noted, is likely due to issues that will likely surface at the conference call and that they needed to show Wall Street they were cutting down expenses greatly. It's doubly difficult because at any other time, some of the talent would likely be able to get signed by AEW, Impact, New Japan, Ring of Honor and MLW. Others would be able to do decently well on the indie scene if they aggressively marketed themselves. But this the worst possible time. No company is making money right now, and while I believe every promotion will go after some names, and a few will get signed quickly, most will not have any options in the business. And getting jobs outside the business isn't easy either. WWE is expected to take in about $73 million per month if they take in $0 in house show tickets, which will be the case, merchandise, which will generate some money, licensing, which will generate some money, digital, which will generate some money, advertising, and any other stream besides television revenue and network subscriptions. Even if every category brings in no money for the remainder of 2020, WWE will gross about $900 million, the largest number in company history. We heard from two people with ownership interest in major sports this past week. One noted that their franchise, which would have been profitable, isn't going to be, who could sympathize with McMahon as a publicly traded company. But he noted the timing of doing the cuts looks the worst. It was noted that as an owner of a non-public company, even though it is not profitable, he can make calls and at this point has no let anyone go. That isn't to say he won't, because the nature of a sports franchise is there will be talent turnover. It was noted that before New Japan and AEW became actual threats, WWE would make cuts, not this severe, but cuts, every year or two. It was also noted that the salary cuts of the talent and producer, which looks to be about $8.4 million per year, will not hurt the company from a product standpoint, as most were not even used much aside from Gallows and Anderson, and to a degree Rusev. None were key players at any time recently. Another, a partial owner of a major league franchise whose season is in jeopardy and whose team will suffer mounting losses this year, was appalled. I've had to do 2 layoffs in my life. They both sucked, but I always understood they sucked more for the people being laid off. I know a few people in the wrestling business, one who lost their job in the furlough today. I understand layoffs, but given WWE's cash position, the essential business status they negotiated, the unsafe conditions they are already asking workers to commit to, and the fact that they are doing so much better than every other place-based business, for them to be the first company in the business to have such a significant layoff is unpalatable. I bought tickets to WrestleMania and was excited to go. I enjoyed watching the empty arena, cinematic 2-day show they put on, and planned to be a loyal customer to the company, until this. With everything going on in the world, we need leadership. What WWE did today is the antithesis of that and renders everything they said about showing up for the fans meaningless. I am a fan, and I care about the talent. Essentially, the choice was short-term stock price in an attempt to have record-breaking profits over workers. And the reality is, under normal circumstances, that's just business. And for some companies, it still is. But as scummy as the reputation of the business is to outsiders, not one other company, all losing money, and many in jeopardy of not being able to continue, no other has done so. To many people, because of the pandemic, priorities in life have changed. It becomes more about being thankful for what you have and helping out those who don't. For others, it's as if they pretend none of this happened. They feel the rules that commoners live by don't apply to them. While others may take a 3-month break from their main goal being record profits. For others, just having great profits is good enough while realizing their employees have it worse than they do. Others just see this as any other tool to enrich their friends, who use it to play party politics at a time when leaders should be about serving the hurting public as opposed to having no care about anything but themselves. The cuts were made in all facets of business in an attempt to save $4 million per month. Between the wrestlers' cuts and the agents, the monthly savings looked to be north of $700,000. But there were cuts in all departments, and the executives and board members all took salary cuts as well. Lots of expenses were cut, and expenses to build a new company headquarters in Stamford were delayed for at least 6 months. Part of the reason to build a new headquarters was to house more employees, as the company was planning to expand with all the new revenue coming in. Due to the economic changes, nobody is expanding, and thus they don't need the new building, and it probably won't be the time to make those expansions and new additions for some time. The new headquarters was to house an increasing number of people, but with the job headcount down, they don't need a larger headquarters. At press time, the cuts led to a stock rise to $39.67 per share, giving the company a $3.067 billion market value. After the cuts were made, it was the first time in several weeks the value of the company has broken the $3 billion threshold. The company has its quarterly conference call on April 23. The belief by many is the cuts were made this week to guard against a drop in some form based on information that won't be taken positive when the financials come out. Dr. Anthony Fauci didn't rule out the idea of sports returning this summer, but in a Snapchat interview gave these guidelines. "There's a way of doing that," he said. "Nobody comes to the stadium. Put the players in big hotels wherever you want to play, keep them very well surveilled, have them tested every single week, and make sure they don't wind up infecting each other or their family, and just let them play the season out." The wrestler Black Demon, out of Sonora, Mexico, is believed to be the first pro wrestler to have died of the coronavirus. AEW officially announced that its next show, Double or Nothing, will take place as a pay-per-view on May 23 at 8 p.m. Eastern, but would not take place at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. This was expected since Nevada had shut down entertainment events through the end of May. That also includes the scheduled May 27 TV show in the same arena. No new location was announced, but given Florida being opened up, They can now go pretty much anywhere in the state and run. They would also be doing another set of television tapings, if not going back to weekly, depending on the state of things at the time. Tony Khan said that he wasn't sure the return would be in Florida, as he said by that time there will be few options, and said that with television taken care of until the pay-per-view, they don't have to figure things out immediately. We don't know how the situation will be in mid-May regarding travel and disease control, and whether they would be able to bring in a full crew or use a more limited crew like they did the last set of television tapings. They had only used 29% of their roster for the last set of tapings, concentrating on the guys from Florida and Georgia, a few from Texas, and others who stayed down. For a pay-per-view show, I'd think they would try and bring all the top guys in. Whether that would include people like Jim Ross or some of the older talent is likely a decision that won't be made until closer to the date. Running a pay-per-view off television with a limited crew and doing an empty arena show at a pay-per-view price point is tough. The one positive is that they can shoot angles as far as interviews and vignettes with the talent not on television. There is a contract with the pay-per-view providers for quarterly shows, and they do want the tradition of Memorial Day Saturday, but that tradition was to include being in Las Vegas. But it still feels that it's going to be a tough sell and hard to put on a pay-per-view caliber show with no fans with pay-per-view pricing. It is uncertain as to when fans will be able to come to shows, and it won't be for a long time. But just like WrestleMania hurt the name of WrestleMania because the interest level and viewership was so down, AEW has hit a very high standard with its pay-per-view shows, and even when not optimum, others will be running events by May, but I don't know anyone except AEW and UFC that will be running with pay-per-view as the main revenue focus of a show. And UFC missed one date and is contracted for 12 for the year, not 4. I guess how well they hold up for that date will be a lesson for the future. And we're still 5+ weeks away, and a lot can change between now and then. There's no guarantee of anything 5 weeks from now other than the likelihood that if things don't get worse between now and then, the show would likely happen. The question is if it would be better to move off this date and maybe do August, September, and November, or even September, October, and November, as perhaps by then there would be shows with crowds. But the problem is the uncertainty aspect. But I wouldn't want to lock a date today and would rather wait until there's a better sign of the future. With WWE having the $9.99 price point, people will forgive average shows easier than at a high price point. And even if running 3 dates close together at the end of the year isn't optimum, and there's no guarantee fans will be back, if nothing else, hopefully things will be better enough to it being less risky as far as health issues, and in time that borders may be open and New York won't be so bad, so you can have less risk and use far more of the complete roster, including international stars, or people in high-risk zones later in the year. AEW did announce that the third Double or Nothing show would be on May 29, 2021, at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, and that ticket holders would be able to trade in their tickets for that show 13 months from now, where that refunds will be offered at the point or purchase. However, Ticketmaster was at first withholding refunds because of its new policy of not offering refunds for shows that have been rescheduled, and this is considered a rescheduled show. However, after being contacted by the promotion, they did start refunding tickets for those who asked on April 15. The UFC announced its return on May 9, with no location announced. White confirmed that the show will take place in their home Apex Arena in Las Vegas, so they are counting on the Nevada Athletic Commission, which had nixed previous shows at the Apex, giving them the okay. I can't see them announcing the date and the return without having privately worked things out with the commission, but it also means that the commission itself would be going against the position of its doctors based on the recent release by the Association of Ringside Physicians. WWE is also going against that position, and AEW will be when they run again. But wrestling being considered not a true sport, even though the body contact, sweat and possibility of passing the virus on doesn't suddenly become fake just because endings and moves are predetermined. So this is another case where wrestling will get a pass. But unless the ARP reverses its position, one has to question a commission sanctioning an event. They will be running regularly from that arena and evidently also running with international fighters at the supposed Fight Island. If not allowed in Nevada, obviously Florida is now an option, since their commission already made it clear they will sanction any show as long as the local authorities don't ban it. And the local authorities no longer have the right to ban it since the governor specified in the bill that any sporting event that is on national television is an essential service. It appears ESPN will rescind their doctrine to UFC not to run shows made just last week now that Florida has made it clear all sports and sports entertainment events that are broadcast nationally can run in the state provided no fans are in attendance. It makes ESPN look hypocritical to change its stance of last week about not carrying the shows during this time frame. But ESPN is in need for live sports. UFC had considered running the Seminole Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida, before switching gears to Lemoore. UFC would at THS point need to run some shows outside the US because so many of its fighters live outside the US, and would be unable to travel into the US. That could also change if UFC gets special permission. And after what's happened in the last week, nothing would surprise me about opening the borders to people who work for your friends given the Trump/White relationship. The May 9th date, which was originally set for UFC 250 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, will now be set for UFC 249. White announced to ESPN a loaded-up card with Tony Ferguson vs. Justin Gaethje for the interim lightweight title, Henry Cejudo vs. Dominic Cruz for the bantamweight title, Amanda Nunes vs. Felicia Spencer for the women's featherweight title, Francis Ngannou vs. Jairzinho Rozenstruik for a likely heavyweight title shot, Calvin Kattar vs. Jeremy Stevens, Donald Cerrone vs. Anthony Pettis, Yorgan De Castro vs. Greg Hardy, Alexei Oleinik vs. Fabricio Verdum, Carla Esparza vs. Michelle Watterson, Uriah Hall vs. Ronaldo Jacare Souza, Vicente Luque vs. Nico Price, and Bryce Mitchell vs. Charles Rosa. Two notable things were that a number of fighters had not been told of the new date at the time the announcements of these fights were made. As a lineup, it is one of the deeper shows in UFC history, and it's a show that does look strong on paper. UFC is expected to run weekly, and in some cases more than once a week when it starts promoting again. Before the Florida policy changed, White had said all events would be taking place at Fight Island starting in about a month, and it would be set up with full training facilities to have fighters eventually train there for a month or perhaps longer prior to their scheduled fights. The second rendition of the XFL closed its doors and filed for bankruptcy this past week, the same week as its planned regular season was scheduled to close. Hence that the league was folding first came out on April 9th when the league announced that it was changing its policy regarding refunds. Previously, after it was announced they were shutting down the season and returning for 2021, people who had purchased tickets in advance were given the option to use those tickets for 2021 or get a refund. But at that time the league announced all tickets were being refunded, including deposits on 2021 season tickets, a total believed to be around $3.5 million. The league refused to answer questions about whether there would be a 2021 season, because at the time nobody other than McMahon likely knew for sure, but obviously that seemed to signal the end for the league. The next day, in a conference call, the league announced there would be no 2021 season. It was laying off everyone immediately aside from a few people based in Stamford who were needed to tie up loose ends. The league did so with no severance pay. The Chapter 11 bankruptcy of Alpha Entertainment, the parent company, was filed on April 13. According to various media sources, Vince McMahon talked with the WWE board of directors about folding the league before it was announced. However, other sources said that nobody in the league, including Oliver Luck, his second-in-command, had it brought up to them and were unaware until the last day. The folding leaves a lot of questions, because the ratings over the first 4 weeks were good enough to be encouraging. The 19% decline in Week 5 was not good, as things should have stabilized by then and were concerning, but hardly disastrous. The belief is that McMahon realized with the money losses due to the pandemic that all the major companies that own the major television conglomerates were taking, that his ability to get a paying television or streaming deal that would allow the league to be profitable just wasn't going to happen anytime soon. McMahon had sold $379,658,303 worth of stock last year to fund the league, a figure it was believed at the time would cover 3 years' worth of money losses. While McMahon's own worth plummeted with the price drop of WWE stock, the reality is that the price right now is not altogether different from when McMahon made the decision to run the league, which came before the negotiations for new Raw and SmackDown deals came in so high and led to the temporary gigantic increase in price. McMahon wouldn't have immediately earmarked all of that money immediately in the league's account. More likely he would have enough to fund the first season, and then put more in the account for upcoming seasons. However, losses must have been far greater than expected. On March 25, McMahon loaned Alpha Entertainment/XFL $7 million based on it having a shortfall in money to cover, among other things, the next payroll. By April 9, McMahon had lent the league another $2 million, and had agreed to lend the league another $3.5 million to cover things related to the bankruptcy. By personally lending the money to the league as opposed to using league money for those costs, he becomes a creditor in case of a purchase of the league or the ability to sell any of its equipment or intellectual property. So it would appear with hindsight McMahon was setting up closing down by March 25. At the time of the shutdown, Alpha Entertainment had $5.6 million in cash on hand, which would include the $9 million McMahon had already lent to the company. It was telling that Luck, who reportedly was making $20 million per year, was not listed as a creditor. That would appear to mean either McMahon did pay him in full or he had an opt-out clause in their agreement in case the league folded, and Luck would get a prorated portion for the full length of his deal. The figure reported could also be an upper limit number or a fake number. According to the bankruptcy filing, the league had about 1,200 creditors, had assets estimated at being worth between $10 million and $50 million and liabilities also worth between $10 million and $50 million. The original XFL had approximately $139 million in losses in its one and only season, which were split between WWE and NBC, which were each 5% owners. McMahon was listed as the sole owner. He had always stated that WWE wasn't involved, but the bankruptcy listings indicated McMahon wasn't telling the complete truth. McMahon was listed as owning 100% of Class A stock and 76.5% of Class B stock, with the WWE listed as owning the other 23.5% of Class B stock. The number of shares representing Class A and Class B was not clear. McMahon had denied from the start that WWE had any connection with the league. It was known WWE owned stock in the league in exchange for the WWE selling the intellectual property such as the name XFL to McMahon for his new league. McMahon had reportedly turned down $50 million for the rights to the name and intellectual property and was opening itself up for potential legal action if they turned down such an offer, and then instead gave it to McMahon. There was a class action lawsuit filed by the Oklahoma Firefighters Pension Fund in December against McMahon, claiming the work of himself and other senior executives were diverted to help the XFL, but the case was dismissed in March. It's unknown if the dismissal was based on an out-of-court settlement or not. Similar lawsuits are still pending. The Action Network reported that with the Alpha Entertainment offices and WWE offices being right next to each other, that there was frequent traffic going back and forth between the two buildings, and it was known that certain employees were working essentially two full-time jobs, one in wrestling and one in football. The list of debtors started with $1.6 million owed to the St. Louis Sports Commission, $1,208.832 to Bevelnep Integrated Solutions of Pittsburgh and Dallas Renegades coach Bob Stoops, the most high-profile coach in the league, at $1,083,333.33. Among the other coaches, Mark Trestman was owed $777,777.78 on an employee contract, Jonathan Hayes was owed $633,333.33, Winston Moss was owed $583,333.33, Kevin Gilbride was owed $583,333.33, as was June Jones and James Zorn. The DeBartolo's Elevate Sports partners were owed $856,175.33. 47 Brand, their hat partner, for goods was owed $846,000. Ticketmaster was owed $655,148.46. Venues where the teams played were owed between $260,000 and $368,000 aside from the higher amount in St. Louis. It was noted by one person in the New York business community as well as another name in sports to us about how this, more than anything this week, has hurt Vince McMahon's name with the idea that he had earmarked enough money for several seasons, but when calling it quits, Stiff not only respected coaching names but all. It was noted that the OFF, which was supposed to be the rival league but didn't even finish a full season, ended up lasting through 8 weeks, while the XFL only finished 5 weeks, but the circumstances were completely different. Still, the losses were high and the changing economy made McMahon feel that what seemed like a good time with media rights skyrocketing for sports suddenly was no longer the case. It must have been extreme and not a good view for the future when it comes to many sports rights, because McMahon got into this to prove his detractors wrong and erase the biggest mainstream blemish on his reputation. The fact is, this XFL was far better received. He went with real football over a sideshow. The reviews were generally positive, but the audience wasn't sticking with it week after week. The death of the league will always be attributed to the timing and a business victim of the coronavirus, and that's certainly a big part of it. But McMahon had earmarked money for 3 years, and one would think sports would likely be back by February 2021. Just giving up at this point would seem to indicate he was pretty sure that the future of sports rights fees in 2022 or 2023, when the coronavirus would hopefully be history, did not look promising enough to stick it out and take a chance. And keep it in mind, from the start, the XFL as a business was always taking a chance. Howard Finkel, who along with Jimmy Lennon Sr. of Los Angeles would be considered one of the 2 greatest ring announcers in American pro wrestling history, passed away on April 16 at the age of 69. Finkel, whose relationship with Vince McMahon dated back to 1975, handled the announcing in the ring of the vast majority of WWF's biggest matches from 1977 through the early 00s. FINKLE was believed to have suffered a serious stroke in 2018. Jerry Lawler mentioned it in passing during an interview, but even some of his close friends in the company were unable to get any information on him when attempting to contact him or get confirmation it was true. He did meet with some talent later while in a wheelchair. FINKLE was born June 7, 1950 in Newark, New Jersey. He was working at an usher at the New Haven Coliseum in 1975 when he first became connected to McMahon. He is the person who came up with the name WrestleMania. This was 1984, so I said 20 years ago 4 guys from Liverpool came across the shores to the United States and made phenomenal impression on everybody, FINKLE said in an interview with Slam Wrestling. They called that Beatlemania. So I said, there was Beatlemania. Why can't there be WrestleMania? The rest is history. FINKLE started working for the McMahons in the mid-70s, hired by Vince's father after working as an usher and reporting to him regarding the rival IWA promotion headed by sports television magnate Eddie Einhorn. That WWF, as it was known at the time, was in a very short war with. It's said that his nickname, the Fink, actually came from his original role in the business. He started ring announcing in Connecticut. His biggest career break was when he got a gig to ring announce the January 17, 1977, Madison Square Garden show, which was headlined by Bruno Sammartino defending the WWF title against Ken Patera, Ivan Putski vs. Bruiser Brody and Chief Jay Strongbow and Billy White Wolf, who later became Sheik Adnan Al-Kaisi, against the masked executioners Killer Kowalski and John Studd. FINKLE immediately broke out of the pack as a standard ring announcer with his inflections and how he would emphasize certain words for the most dramatic feel. He was the inside-the-ring voice of Madison Square Garden wrestling through the end of 1983, and when the company went national, he was the inside-the-ring voice of the company. In the combat sports world, his iconic nature of saying "and new" after a championship change, for the national audience is probably most remembered for Hulk Hogan's 1984 Madison Square Garden win over the Iron Sheik. Some would say that match and his call at the end kicked off the end of an era in the business and the beginning of another era. Because of his thorough knowledge of the product, his style enhanced the characters of every babyface and every heel at the start of the match. He saved the best of his booming voice for the headliners, and the icons, such as Sammartino, and later Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Steve Austin, Bret Hart, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Roddy Piper, Bob Backlund, Jimmy Snuka, Randy Savage and others. He would have his unique way, particularly important in the era before entrance music, where he would dramatically say something like, "From the Fiji Islands," in a way that the crowd would explode, knowing Jimmy Snuka, the company's most popular wrestler in the early 80s, was about to come down the aisle. He would exude reverence to the babyface champions and build bigger pops for announcing their victories. Perhaps most memorable to fans of the late 70s would be just before the final match of the Madison Square Garden, and generally, the main event was put in the middle of the show those days. He would come out to announce the lineup for the next show. He'd start slowly for the prelims, announcing matches that would get mediocre reactions. His would build to the mid-carders, build up even more if a special attraction star like Dusty Rhodes, Andre the Giant or Mil Mascaras was a guest on the show. He would peak for the championship match, always getting a huge reaction even though based on booking patterns and the latest heel being pushed on television, or based on a disputed finish of the main event earlier, most fans generally would have been able to figure out the match. If it was a gimmick match, like a cage match or Texas death match, FINKLE would put the usual emphasis on heel challenger and face champion of the era, but his booming voice would explode with the announcement of the definitive stipulation on next show that would, in theory, settle this feud. But his most memorable announcements would come from 1978 to 1980, when Backlund was champion, on the occasional nights when Sammartino would return. He would announce the championship match as always, tease that was it, even act like he was about to exit the ring for a split second, and then say that there was one more match, announce the heel who was usually a previous title contender, and then, in his proudest and most booming voice, say, and his opponent, the living legend, Bruno Sammartino. When the WWF went national in 1984, he became a familiar part of the expansion. He was the lead ring announcer of most of the biggest PPVs from the national expansion through the end of the 90s. He also toured the country, and later the world, working as a full-time ring announcer. In foreign countries when WWF came for the first time, he would get a huge pop himself because he was the first person to come out during the show, and Howard Finkel's face and voice meant authentic WWF. FINKLE became a full-time employee on April 1, 1980, the first hire of Vince McMahon Jr., 2 years before he was able to buy the promotion from his father and his father's business partners for $1 million, a steal for a company that probably grossed 7 times that much in annual revenue just in live gates alone. When the TV tapings moved out of Hamburg and Allentown with the notional expansion, and became held around the country in medium-sized and later major arenas, FINKLE was the ring announcer of WWE Superstars. That was a show for the company's biggest matches and angles prior to the advent of Raw in 1993. He also worked in talent relations. One of FINKLE's minor roles in the 80s was in gathering information for the higher-ups like Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson. He subscribed to this publication, with the idea of fooling me by using the name Kathy Nickerson, his girlfriend at the time, who later became his wife, with the idea I wouldn't know it was him. He was actually one of the first subscribers to this publication dating back to early 1983. He would Xerox, remember that term, the issues and give them to the key people. Years later, when hotlines and the internet became bigger, FINKLE's role was to do a daily news update for McMahon and the other key figures, sometimes called the FINKLE Report. I will always say this, no matter how much of an enemy of the state I was considered at different points in time, or in that era, at every house show in San Francisco and Oakland that I attended, he would always go out of his way to find out where I was sitting. He would be the perfect company rep, friendly, outgoing, and talk business in vague terms without saying anything controversial. With the most, he'd talk about the aspects of the old business that we were both fond of. No matter how big the modern era got, he was still the most nostalgic about the crowd pops for Sammartino versus superstar Billy Graham in Madison Square Garden, in his first year of announcing at the world's most famous venue. He would still make clear how impressed he was at the growth of the company and the positive changes of the business, never saying things were worse, just that they changed, and also never knocking the things that made the old business special to him when he grew up and started out. At live shows, FINKLE and New Japan's Hideki Tanaka, their ring announcer of the same generation, were the masters of grabbing the hammer for the ring bell on near falls, so if you were looking in their direction, you got the impression they were ready to ring it and making the near falls feel like they could be the finish. Most of the arena could never see it, and really unless you were at ringside you probably wouldn't even know or realize the slight touch he'd add to the excitement of the matches. In many ways, FINKLE's career plight was similar to that of Jim Ross. He was generally considered the best in the business at what he did, but the mentality of the business became less and less about who was best, and more about who was good looking. They were the same age, had similar backgrounds. Both loved wrestling as kids and both had to adapt to a changing world and business. Both had a love for the business and great memories of it. In many ways, they were very different, but there are striking similarities as well. FINKLE could be the butt of McMahon's jokes, like Ross, although he handled the chairman's sense of humor very differently. But also with FINKLE, they were never as personal or as cruel. With FINKLE, it could be an angle done where they would smash up his car so Vince could see FINKLE's reaction, but Vince would, of course, pay for all damages. At times he was nicknamed Vince's Mel Cooley in wrestling, after a character on the original Dick Van Dyke television show in the 1960s. Cooley was the straight-laced butt of constant jokes by Maury Amsterdam, one of the great comedians of all time, on the show. In the early 90s, for example, when there was a blood test for an athletic commission that Hulk Hogan had to take to be licensed, for whatever reason, and you can speculate yourself, they decided against sending Hogan's blood. Whether it was Hogan refusing or them not wanting to risk it given Hogan's name value, it was ordered for FINKLE to donate blood that was then listed to be Hogan's. Obviously they all knew that there would be nothing in FINKLE's blood that could lead to problems. Somehow this got out and was quite an embarrassing news story at the time, although it had no ramifications past that. There are certain people in the industry who are special, wrote Lance Storm in a social media post. They are so unique and stand out in their specific role that they become iconic, almost a rite of passage to the rest of us when we get to work with them. I would assume with each generation these people change. For me and anyone even remotely close to my generation, Howard FINKLE was one of these people. You often hear about Jim Ross in this role, and he absolutely is. Everyone still wants Jim Ross to call one of their matches. It's like a bucket list event, because he to them is the voice of wrestling and just always made your matches better. Howard FINKLE is another, such a special human being. He's the greatest ring announcer of all time, and his voice brings back all the great moments in my life as a wrestling fan. And being introduced by him was every bit as much a bucket list moment in my career as having Jim Ross calling my matches. It was like a sign that you've made it, that you've really done it. On top of his unparalleled iconic voice, he was also the nicest, fleetest man you could ever meet. He just loved wrestling, announcing wrestling, and being around everyone in wrestling. There was a special kindness to Howard FINKLE, almost the naivete of an enthusiastic child. When he was at a show, he was the proverbial kid in a candy store. He was in his happy place. His face lit up no matter who he ran into. When you shook hands with Howard FINKLE, you were always greeted with a smile. My favorite memory of Howard was spending time with him at the Raw 10th anniversary show that we did at the WWE restaurant in New York. Storm continued. We were packed into the place and I remember being there absurdly early and having a lot of time to kill. I'm not one for crowds, so when I spotted Howard by himself, I immediately headed in his direction and spent the better part of a couple of hours talking with him. He told me the story of how he got in with WWE and how he was the first official employee at WWE, then WWF. His employee number was 1. At the time there were a lot of wrestling autobiographies being done and he asked me what I thought about him doing a book. I could tell he was hoping WWE might ask him to do one. My first thought was, with all of the big names in WWE, I can't imagine them asking Howard. But then I thought about the time he'd been on the job, and all of the things he'd witnessed. We talked about how I thought to sell the book. It might have to be marketed as a bit of a fly-on-the-wall type book, the history of WWE as seen through the eyes of Howard Finkel. I have no idea if it would have sold, but I have no doubt it would have been an amazing tale. Indeed, few know that Finkel, who only did the role a few times as a fill-in, was actually the best actual play-by-play announcer WWF had in the company in the mid-80s. Finkel was a legitimate major fan, had a great memory, and was a natural at calling matches and understood getting people over, the moves, had the voice and understood how to use it for maximum effect. Deep down, I believe he wished he would have been given that opportunity. Once when he did a show, he got praised for his work by Larry Matuszak, who considered Finkel maybe his best friend in the company, and who himself was one of the best television announcers of the 70s and early 80s. When Matuszak went to work for WWF in 1984, he was never given an opportunity at that job. Instead, they wanted a guy like Jack Reynolds, who was terrible at announcing wrestling, but had the right look and better voice. There was a brief period in the late 80s when local ratings in St. Louis on KPLR had dropped so much the station was upset. And to pacify management, McMahon had Matuszak do localized voiceovers of superstars for that market alone. But that was obviously just a short-term thing and didn't fit into McMahon's long-time plans. After Matuszak praised Finkel's work, Finkel responded and told him, "People like you and me, it doesn't matter how good we are at this. We're just not what they want." Finkel was the most loyal WWE employee there was, always talking about the company in a positive way, and always putting on a loyal face at the ribs. I never heard of him complaining even to people who knew, past maybe disagreeing with the decision here or there. He was always loyal to Vince McMahon. Even when replaced as ring announcer when he was the best in the business, he'd just say how the business changes and what they want changes and he didn't fit what they want, without ever appearing bitter. He was extremely well liked by almost everyone, universally respected as generally the best to ever do it, by both the fans of the era as well as the talent. The outpouring of emotion for him at his death was almost universal. The only exception would have been Bill Moody, Paul Bearer, in a taped interview with Jim Cornette. Moody said, "I have memories. Have some bad memories. I've seen him crying when they treated him so bad. He sat down and cried. If they treated me like that, I'd probably cry too. They treated him like shit." Another former wrestler noted the saddest part was how shitty he was treated, noting what a nice man he was. And in that environment, many there saw his kindness as weakness. Yet no matter what he could have done, with the next generation of memories as the best ever to yet another generation, he always seemed thankful for what he had. Even as Howard's health declined, he was more concerned about me and my fight to be healthy, noted Roman Reigns on Twitter. "We lost one of the greatest ever. He was the greatest ring announcer ever and that couldn't even compare to the human being that he was." For the next generation of talent that grew up as fans, having Finkel introduce you to many was like having a Ross or a Jesse Ventura, who was considered WWF's coolest announcer of the late 80s, call their matches. At WrestleMania 2000, after Inc. won our first tag titles, I found myself alone in the locker room. Howard Finkel after the show, said J. Christian Resso on Twitter. I said, "Howard, I've waited my whole life to hear you say those words, and knew you." He hugged me. He was genuine. He was the best. Many of the wrestlers of the current generation had similar thoughts growing up. They still had the moments where the ring announcer said it, copying Finkel's call, that it could never be 100% the same as if it was Finkel doing it himself. The first time Finkel was replaced from announcing the major shows was in 1995, when they used the younger and better-looking Manny Garcia. Finkel still toured as a house show ring announcer, but that experiment failed in McMahon's eyes and Finkel was brought back years later. But unlike Ross, who was replaced and brought back repeatedly, Finkel returned to television and pay-per-view in early 1996, but only lasted a short time in the position until being replaced by Lillian Garcia. After that move, the position was generally reserved for younger and better-looking men and women, even if none could do it at the level of Finkel. He still did some PPVs, and on occasion, would be brought back for a special occasion, but as far as actual television, aside from a few angles, he was rarely used. If not for this, I'd say FINKLE would have been an automatic Hall of Famer, but in other sports, when you had a legitimate Hall of Famer, particularly in a ring announcer or PA announcer or play-by-play announcer, they become so iconic they wouldn't be replaced until they were very old and could no longer do the job, and in the cases for the most iconic, often past that point because fans would be upset at it. But McMahon pulled FINKLE at the age of 45, and again at 47, because he was always about putting young people on television, even though he would make exceptions on the announcing side. But he got the idea that the ring announcing job should go to good-looking people, and not the most competent, and as far as that went, nobody was better than FINKLE, or even the voice the fans accepted as the authentic voice. He was put in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009 and elected into the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame in 2018. He and Lennon are the only two ring announcers in the Observer Hall of Fame. He did PPVs after being taken off Raw and house shows for years after, but was being phased out. He still worked house shows for years, and was the best at doing it. He still was a key figure every year at WrestleMania when his role would be to introduce the Hall of Fame inductees or their family members in front of the big crowd through 2016, prior to his health issues. Once in 2011 he was brought back at the insistence of CM Punk, at the time one of the company's biggest stars, who wanted FINKLE to introduce his title match with Alberto Del Rio. Throughout the years he did a number of angles, again largely for the amusement of the chairman. He did a 1992 feud with Wimpy manager Dr. Harvey Wippleman, who tore off FINKLE's tux. This led to a January 9, 1995 tuxedo match on Raw, which was more to entertain McMahon as the two guys were out there with the object of starting out in tuxedos, and having their clothes torn off until they were left in their underwear. FINKLE, as the babyface, had to win, but he also had most of his clothes torn off, enough that he was in the ring in just saggy underwear marching around the ring with the Bushwhackers doing their walk in celebration. In 1998, Jeff Jarrett shaved what little hair FINKLE had left. This was to build to a SummerSlam match where FINKLE was in X-Pac's corner for a hair versus hair match with Jarrett. FINKLE got his revenge by helping cut Jarrett's hair, although Jarrett, in spite of what the stipulation said, was not shaved bald and simply went to a shorter-haired look. In 1999, he played a deranged former ring announcer who attacked Tony Chimel on SmackDown in an attempt to take his job back. WWF did the same angle a few years later on Raw with Jim Ross, as the deluded former announcer who thought he was still the voice of Raw after Michael Cole took his place. Chris Jericho did an angle with him where FINKLE played the masked heel ref, El Dopo, who gave Mr. Hughes an unfair win over Ken Shamrock. In 2002, FINKLE did a similar angle to what he and Ross did, as a heel feuding with Garcia over the Raw ring announcing spot. This led to a Garcia vs. FINKLE clothes-tearing match, Garcia in an evening gown and FINKLE in a tux. FINKLE had insulted other WWE women at the time. While the draw was the idea that FINKLE would strip Garcia on television, it ended up with Garcia, Trish Stratus and Stacy Keibler all tearing his clothes off, again leaving him in his underwear. He was brought back in 2012 to be the guest ring announcer on the 1000th episode of Raw. He was also used as a cast member in an attempt by WWE to sell a reality show concept, Legends House. The series ended up getting no television takers, and was repackaged years later for the WWE Network. He appeared in a WWE web series The JBL and Cole Show through 2015. While he was not there due to health reasons, his voice was last used on the January 22, 2018, 25th anniversary of Raw where a tape of him introducing The Undertaker was used. For people who grew up from the late 70s through the late 90s, the voice of FINKLE will always be remembered as more than just a ring announcer, but as the ring announcer. Whether it be Bruce Buffer in UFC or pretty much every English-speaking ring announcer for any pro wrestling promotion who has any long-time fandom, they will, either consciously or subconsciously, copy his mannerisms, voice modulation changes, and dramatic pauses. Unlike with Lennon, who had a unique style of his own that wouldn't work for others, with FINKLE, his style is the textbook on what a ring announcer does, in every way. Partially because of time, aside from his son, there really isn't a Jimmy Lennon Sr. in almost anyone. There will be some Michael Buffer in many future boxing ring announcers. There will be a lot of Howard FINKLE in every ring announcer who grew up watching him, and later, from people who watched a next generation of announcers who themselves saw FINKLE as their role model of how to do the job. And whenever you see a title change, and hear the words, "and new," remember where it came from, as that, for generations, will be his everlasting legacy. The story behind why UFC, a company that is incredibly profitable, easily the most profitable combat sports promotion of all time, was so desperate to run has to do with the economics of the company's 2016 purchase and controlling interest of Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whitesell of Endeavor. While those who have studied the economics of UFC have said with its TV deals and pay-per-view deals, even without paid attendance at live events it should gross $750 million and be profitable this year, there are a number of underlying issues. As is well known, UFC itself has an enormous debt on its own based on the money Endeavor had to take on $2.3 billion of debt to purchase the company at the $3.995 billion price in 2016. Sports Illustrated note that UFC's loans come to term in 2026, at the same time the ESPN contract as well as Dana White's employment contract comes due. Vince McMahon's folding of the XFL was based on the belief that the TV rights package he was hoping to get for the league will no longer be possible, but predicting the landscape of television, streaming, sports and the economy of the world 5 years from now, when the next set of deals would have to be negotiated, is foolish. But the picture is also clearly not as rosy as it would have been 2 months ago. But unlike UFC, which in the deal Endeavor got 51% of, Endeavor's other businesses aren't doing nearly as well. UFC's financial success was going to help carry other businesses and other debt. A April 13 analysis of Endeavor noted that they entered this year heavily leveraged and this unexpected significant drop in revenue could potentially result in an unsustainable capital structure. Standard & Poor Global's economists have lowered their bond rating from B to CCC+ and said they've changed the outlook to negative. UFC has a B-level credit rating based on uncertainty about the schedule. The big question that people are watching is whether Endeavor will be forced to sell points in UFC, which would give them less than 50%. And then they would no longer have voting control. What happened last week was that California Governor Gavin Newsom directly called Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, the parent company of ESPN, about UFC's plans to run weekly events in Lemoore, California, which was on Native American land. It is supposed to be sovereign land, but the governor does have power in extreme situations, such as this, and he made it clear UFC events would not be tolerated. Senator Dianne Feinstein had also expressed similar concern about UFC events in the state. ESPN then told White they wouldn't be carrying his shows from Lemoore, and without the ESPN money, the shows made no economic sense to run. The coronavirus and its effect on the Japanese pro wrestling world was the subject of an April 15 meeting with the Japanese Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology, Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer Hiroshi Hashi, and representatives of 8 companies at the Lower House Assembly Hall in Tokyo. New Japan Pro Wrestling Noah, Stardom, All Japan, DDT Pro Wrestling Diana and Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling came together with Hashi. The companies made a joint proposal saying that they realize that the top priority for coronavirus testing kits have to be those on the front lines battling the disease, but did ask the government that when those people are taken care of, that they would like testing kits to protect the wrestlers and staff within the industry. They also asked that the government assistance that pertains to employees include pro wrestlers who are listed as contractors in most pro wrestling companies in Japan. The wrestlers who are not on guaranteed salaries, which would be most outside of the biggest companies, are for the most part unable to perform and get paid, and asked that they be given the benefits and protection of full-time employees. Hashi, who represented Japan in the 1984 Olympics in wrestling, and during the 1990s was both the former New Japan assistant booker and one of its biggest stars during a 90s boom period before going into politics, called a united front of promotions together for discussion on the industry. Thank you to the representatives of the professional wrestling industry for sharing their plight, as well as for the explanations from official bodies today. There are measures we can enact to assist enterprises, promotions and wrestlers during these times, and I would like to continue to discuss them further. This situation will not last forever. Speedy and accurate testing, effective treatment and medicinal development are all things the whole world is working together on. Professional wrestling has a huge and very important role in raising the flag of victory over COVID-19. I ask all staff members and all wrestlers to keep working to be in the best shape possible to spread joy to the fans with incredible matches very soon. In a surprise, Hiroshi Tanahashi, the biggest star who attended, told Hashi that he believes pro wrestling should be the last sport to return. While events have been cancelled, our wrestlers have been training diligently and maintaining their focus for an eventual return, he said. Yes, not being able to wrestle does make a lot of us concerned for our livelihoods, but in the world of sports, be that baseball, soccer or sumo, I feel that professional wrestling should be the anchor. I think it should be acceptable for professional wrestling to be the last sport to return to full activity. I want people to know that when professional wrestling is back, then and only then, it means truly that Japanese entertainment has properly recovered. While Tanahashi's comments got the most attention, being quoted all over Japan, the being the last to open may sound romantic and even symbolic, the reality is much different. The statement with the most reality about the Japanese pro wrestling business, as well as the American business, was by Namachi Marufuji, one of the top stars and the executive vice president of Noah Global Entertainment. While Noah would appear more stable being under the umbrella of the much larger cyber agent company, he noted that the pandemic is as much a crisis for the parent companies of pro wrestling companies as it is for wrestling companies. If we don't bring in revenues, they can't pay us either, he said. We are not running any shows right now. We would like to create a new structure, such as running pay shows on social media, where we can bring in money into the company. We can get paid, our staff can get paid, the company can make money. Marufuji said he doesn't look at this as a crisis just for pro wrestling Noah, or even for Japanese pro wrestling, but one for the pro wrestling business worldwide. The government sporting body talked about working to combat the spread of COVID-19 by having temperature checks and hand sanitizers at venues, as well as fans and companies working together on a program where fans can donate their ticket refund money to tax-deductible organizations. Mayu Iwatani, the top star of Stardom, talked more of wanting to get back to work as soon as possible, but not without health precautions. On a personal note, on February 19th, I was scheduled to have a birthday party event, which was cancelled. On March 8th, we streamed a live event with no fans in Korakuen Hall, but since then there have been cancellations after cancellations. We list our occupations as professional wrestlers, but to not have matches is, of course, incredibly frustrating. If we have access to testing kits for wrestlers and staff, it can put minds at ease and help us return to active duty. Rather than sitting and waiting for an unclear point in the future, to be able to take some kind of action like we're doing today is something I'm extremely grateful for. I hope this can help the entire industry come back strong. Takaki Kidani, the head of Bushiroad, the parent company of both New Japan and Stardom, said after the conclusion, this was a big first step not just for professional wrestling, but for live entertainment at large. The goal of being fully active again is still some distance away, but today we were able to discuss various methods of support, and I am absolutely glad I was able to present this proposal. Others at the meeting included New Japan chairman Naoki Sugabayashi, Suwama, the Triple Crown champion from All Japan, Takenori Fukuda, the director of All Japan, Hiroshima, one of the top stars of DDT, Akira Takahashi, the operating executive of DDT, Masashi Ishiguro, the head of public relations for Noah Global Entertainment, Katsuhiko Harada, the director of Bushiroad Fight, the separate company that runs Stardom, and the kickboxing company, Yuka Sakazuki, the AEW wrestler who is a top star for Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling, Tetsuya Kauta, an office rep for Tokyo Joshi Pro, Kyoko Inoue, the top star of the women's Diana promotion and one of the top stars during the 90s with All Japan Women, as well as Taisha Fuwa of the Diana promotion. The April 8 AEW vs NXT battle, which ended up with the show's 400 people apart in NXT's favor in total viewers, although AEW still won 18-49 solidly, did teach us a few lessons regarding overdoing gimmicks and long empty arena matches. On April 15, NXT again had more viewers while AEW was more dominant in 18-49. The April 8 difference was so small that it was due to NXT's better lead-in as NCIS before NXT is doing around 1 million viewers. The big match on April 8 was the Johnny Gargano vs Tommaso Ciampa empty arena match, which went nearly an hour of television time. This was pushed hard as the final confrontation of what was the biggest feud in the history of NXT. It was the main event of the biggest takeover of the year, and a few weeks back they did more than 60 minutes of a package building this bout up. If you're looking for the overall Gargano vs Ciampa performance, it opened with solid growth with the audience going from 636,000 to 696,000. Without a doubt the match itself was the reason NXT was up overall 19.5% from the week before for the show at a time when generally everything is in a decline. However, the match itself taught us another lesson. It declined in every quarter and only won one of the 4 quarters, which would be from about the 10 to 25 minute mark, and also came with AEW doing hype for Jon Moxley vs Jake Hager, a Matt Hardy interview and a Brody Lee quick squash. It lost 56,000 viewers from the first to the 4th quarter, but only 4,000 in 18-34 and 5,000 in 35-49. So while not showing growth, as it should have, at best it was a slight negative in 18-49, but obviously it must have been a bigger negative older and younger, likely older since half the NXT audience is usually over the age of 53. The issue here is again, going so long. It was also the second straight week that the AEW main event lost viewers at the end because of being a 20-minute plus match, which was not a regular thing previously. And it was with Cody, who aside from Chris Jericho, has been the company's biggest ratings mover. Even a women's ladder match with title implications on NXT lost viewers. Ladder matches due to their uniqueness usually do well on television, but another aspect of both the ladder match and the Gargano Ciampa is that NXT is a hardcore show and the oldest skewing show. So it's an older audience, but probably an audience that did watch WrestleMania. They had just seen a never-ending street fight and had just seen a ladder match a few days earlier. The obvious lesson here is when they have gimmicks that work, don't waste them by doing them twice in the same week, because if the second one is NXT, they aren't going to work. Given the ratings pattern of those matches, NXT should have won the ratings by a larger margin overall. Because of NXT skewing older, they weren't going to win in 18-49 because the gap is too big at the 35-49 level in favor of AEW. But presenting two takeover matches, including the main event of the biggest takeover of the year, they still were up from it. But this is very much a learning week when it comes in particular to long empty arena matches. In particular, at 9:29 the peak, so people were into the match for more than 20 minutes, there was a big NXT drop, and a second one at 9:51. They never came close again to the 9:29 level, so about 20 minutes was the sweet spot for that match. The other question, which was how people would take the Kenny Omega and Michael Nakazawa versus Best Friends DDT style match. Since that match went over 2 quarters, we can see that it was a growth match, and in fact, the ending nearly hit the high point of the show for AEW. In looking at minute-by-minute numbers, the key thing is the upward/downward triangles, in the sense every break leads to a very significant portion of the audience leaving, and for the most part, they go to the other show. As far as a peaks, the only time AEW broke 800,000 was late in the Kenny Omega and Michael Nakazawa versus Best Friends, which was also the match that got the most criticism. The main event peaked at nearly 800,000 a few minutes into the Cody versus Shawn Spears match. But that match lost a lot of steam during the commercial breaks and never fully got it back. Gargano Ciampa on the other station nearly hit 800,000 at 9:29, but fell hard and was below 700,000 the entire last quarter. It's not a perfect model, but it appears maybe 115,000 swing viewers, who will switch during a commercial break, and then come back. But obviously not all at once. That explains all the picture-in-picture stuff, but in recent weeks both sides have dropped that because it's been more difficult on taped shows and the stations probably have less people in studio live working during those times. Most of the Money in the Bank card, which right now is scheduled to take place on May 10th at the Performance Center, is decided upon. The show will be built around 2 ladder matches, a men's and a women's match. The winner will be able to challenge for the title of their respective brand. In the women's match, Asuka, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax qualified, as well as likely Naomi will, since she's facing Dana Brooke in qualifier, and it looks like Brooke is booked elsewhere on the pay-per-view. The men's match has 4 announced qualifiers that take place this coming week, with 2 others yet to be announced. Those bouts are Daniel Bryan versus Cesaro on the April 17th SmackDown and Rey Mysterio versus Murphy, Aleister Black versus Austin Theory, and Apollo Crews versus MVP on the April 20th Raw. So favorites would be Bryan, Mysterio, Black, and Crews, so it looks like they are going for the workers. There could be swerves to set other things up. Matches that have been confirmed are the current plans, all of which were being teased on television this past week, are Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins for the WWE title, Braun Strowman versus Bray Wyatt for the Universal title, Street Profits versus Viking Raiders for the Raw Tag titles, Miz and John Morrison versus Usos versus New Day for the SmackDown Tag titles, and Bayley versus Tamina for the SmackDown Women's title. Not confirmed to us, but already also teased is Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss defending the Women's Tag titles against Dana Brooke and Carmella. Kevin Sullivan was on Jim Cornette's podcast to talk about the Chris Benoit Dark Side of the Ring episode, where he came off as one of the villains of the piece with the allegation that Nancy left him because he gave her a black and ended up with Benoit. He said that he didn't participate in the show out of respect for Nancy's parents, who he said were good friends of his at one time, and he realizes that every morning they have to wake up with the knowledge that their daughter and grandson were murdered. He said that he never attacked her, but that at one point there were domestic violence charges against her on him. Yeah, I've never brought that up, Jimmy. And you know, if you look at it, there were charges put on her. She spent 3 days in jail and she stabbed me with a knife. And that was the breaking of our relationship completely. And I never went back to Daytona. And I paid for her to get out of jail, but I never brought it up because of the respect I had for her mother and father. And I know it weighs heavy on their heart. I used to say to myself, I can carry this, I can carry it. They can't. I'm not trying to be a hero here, but why put more weight on their heads and say that? Regarding Sandra Toffoloni saying that Kevin abused Nancy, he said, for Sandra to say that, I think sometimes maybe Sandra sees things her own way. And these guys from Dark Side of the Ring certainly aren't Sherlock Holmes or Watson, or they would have figured that out. Did some research on that. Her mother was very appreciative, and father too, of what I did to get it squashed. She never really went to court and said this is the only time we ever had a problem, it won't happen again, and I got her out. And she went home and I got the car and drove to the Keys. He said he got her out of trouble and moved to the Florida Keys. He said he was living in the Keys and didn't even see Nancy for 4 months, and if she had a black eye, he has no idea how she would have gotten it, but it couldn't have been from him, and said that Sandra got her timeline wrong. Sullivan said that the death of their daughter and grandson had to be the hardest thing in the world for Nancy's parents, and said he didn't want to do that show without their okay. Sullivan said that Sandra Toffoloni didn't know the entire situation and that he and Nancy had problems for 6 months, and said it was a combination of the age difference, as he was 15 years older than she was. He was 47 and she was 32 when this happened. Chris Benoit was 30, and they were growing apart and living apart. She was living in Daytona Beach and he was living in the Florida Keys. He said that Chris's wife in Edmonton was pregnant at the time, and Chris met with Sullivan and Bischoff about the angle, saying that he has to make sure his wife won't get upset about it. In a different story in that conversation, Cornette noted that when Ric Flair was booker in WCW in 1989 and Cornette and Sullivan were on the booking team, that they had the idea of a new Four Horsemen group of Flair, Arnold Anderson, and the Midnight Express with Nancy as their manager. He said they even started taping promos to start the story when Jim Herd, who didn't see anything in the Midnight Express and was wanting to get rid of them, nixed it. Another interesting point is that Sullivan said that he and Paul Heyman were working together in the 90s when Heyman had everyone thinking ECW was at war with WWF and even more WCW, saying that Chris Benoit was coming to WCW, but because he was friends with Heyman, they let Heyman have Benoit for 6 weeks beforehand. In actuality, Benoit actually first came to ECW in August 1994 for the NWA tournament when he was a New Japan guy. WCW had a relationship with New Japan, who was working for Dennis Coralluzzo, running an NWA promotion in the same area as ECW. Heyman and Coralluzzo hated each other but worked together on the NWA tournament, where Heyman double-crossed Coralluzzo with the idea Shane Douglas would win the tournament, and that Douglas would eventually drop it to Benoit, Coralluzzo's guy. Douglas won, then threw down the belt and said it was worthless and from the past, and instead they created the Extreme Championship Wrestling title from the tournament. Prior to that, ECW stood for Eastern Championship Wrestling. Heyman then lured Benoit from Coralluzzo to work for ECW, and he worked there for 1 year in between his Japan tours, and didn't start with WCW in November 1995. However, Nancy worked for ECW, the wife of the WCW booker, and it's not a secret that it was Nancy who was wowed by the matches involving Rey Mysterio Jr., Psicosis, Juventud Guerrera and others, and talked Kevin into signing Conan and all of his guys. However, even after that, Heyman continued to use Nancy until Nancy got her role in WCW as part of Ric Flair's entourage, which eventually included Elizabeth and Deborah McMichael. NXT beat AEW in total viewers by a 692,000 to 683,000 margin on April 15, while in 18-49, NXT was number 27 at 0.25 and NXT was number 58 at 0.17. As compared to last week, NXT was down 0.1% in viewers and 10.5% in 18-49. AEW was down 1.3% in viewers and 3.8% in 18-49. Unlike last week, where that should have been expected, AEW had built up the Jon Moxley vs. Jake Hager title match for a few weeks, so both NXT's staying the same with less of note built up, while AEW's lack of gain were both surprises. Next week, since NXT promoted more for next week, plus their lead-in edge, probably favors them for total viewers, but the difference in 18-49 is still pretty substantial. AEW is hurt more because part of its edge was the rabid live arena fans, and that isn't going to be the case. In addition, NXT has its full roster available and AEW won't for a while. NXT is live and AEW isn't, but I don't think that's as much of a factor since AEW spoilers haven't gotten out anywhere since, like WWE, both were taped on a closed set. Even though I see these numbers as just whatever they are during a bad time, the reality is that in the TV industry, they are still a big deal, although 18-49 is the key number. That said, both are much lower than I don't know that can change. AEW was 7th in its time slot among non-news shows in 18-49. NXT was 10th. Because NXT didn't finish in the top 50 for the night, we don't have demo breakdowns. For AEW, they did a 0.11 in 12-17, up 22.2%, 0.15 in 18-34, up 15.4%, 0.35 in 35-49, down 7.9%, and 0.28 in 50+, down 3.4%. The audience was 70.0% male in 18 to 49 and 61.2% male in 12 to 17. The 4-hour block on FS1 on April 14 saw the 8 p.m. Ruthless Aggression show on John Cena do 226,000 viewers, the 9 p.m. show on Evolution did 302,000 viewers, the 10 p.m. show on Brock Lesnar did 224,000 viewers. WWE Backstage with that lead-in and also coming after Dark Side did 161,000 viewers with CM Punk, up 15% from last week. Dark Side of the Ring covering Jimmy Snuka and the death of Nancy Argentino did 209,000 viewers, its lowest so far this season, down 7.5% from last week's show on Brawl for All. Raw on April 13 did 1,913,000 viewers, 1.32 viewers per home and 722,000 in 18 to 49. It was the lowest number for a live Raw in the modern era, although still finished ahead of two taped shows, the December 24, 2018 show, 1,775,000 viewers, and the December 23, 2019 show, 1,835,000 viewers. It was down 8.9% from the Raw after WrestleMania, so in that sense it wasn't that bad, but it was down 21.0% from last week's 18 to 49 number. It was down 27.9% from the same week last year, but that was normal circumstances and a draft show, and down 38.8% from last year in 18 to 49. The show did 458,000 males 18 to 49, down 14.1% from last week's show, and 264,000 women 18 to 49, down 29.8% from last week. The show was fourth in 18 to 49, trailing 3 news shows and Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, and 32nd overall, trailing 30 news shows and 1 entertainment show. The basic gist is that the number of viewers interested at the start was unusually low, but probably the new level for the next few months. But the show was good for those who watched as they kept the viewers better than most weeks. The first hour did 1,994,000 viewers. The second hour did 1,913,000 viewers. The third hour did 1,832,000 viewers. The high point was the opening segment with the Drew McIntyre interview and Andrade coming out, at 2,065,000 viewers. Asuka vs. Ruby Riott lost 6,000 viewers, which I consider as a win. Aleister Black vs. Oney Lorcan lost 153,000 viewers. The Becky Lynch promo and Shayna Baszler vs. Sarah Logan gained 73,000 viewers. Austin Theory vs. Akira Tozawa lost 62,000 viewers. You have to accept losing segments early on when trying to get over new characters. Interviews with Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins lost 58,000 viewers. Angel Garza vs. Tahuti Miles gained 29,000 viewers. Nia Jax's return vs. Kairi Sane and the Charlotte Flair promo gained 58,000 viewers. Bobby Lashley vs. No Way Jose lost 139,000 viewers. Viking Raiders vs. Ricochet and Cedric Alexander lost 26,000 viewers. And the McIntyre vs. Andrade main event lost 25,000 viewers to 1,766,000, and was the low point of the show. The biggest note is that this show clearly appealed more to men than women. In the 18 to 49 demo from the first to third hour, the drop was 4.2% for men, which was much better than usual. For women it was 23.9%. In teenagers, for teenage boys the drop was 0.4% from the first to third hour. Teenage girls dropped 42.7% from the first to third hour. The show did a 0.34 in 12 to 17 and 13.3% from last week's Raw after Mania, 0.30 in 18 to 34, down 21.1%, 0.82 in 35 to 49, down 19.6%, and 0.87 in 50 plus, down 5.4%. The audience was 64.0% male in 18 to 49 and 69.4% male in 12 to 17. SmackDown on April 10 did a 1.40 rating and 2,317,000 viewers, 1.37 viewers per home, and 823,000 in 18 to 49 for the first SmackDown show after WrestleMania. The household rating was down 5.4% from last week. Total viewers was down 3.4%, and 18 to 49 was down 1.8%. It was the second lowest overall number on Fox to date and lowest in 18 to 49. SmackDown did end 0.6 in 18 to 49. Once again Fox was tied with NBC for last place in 18 to 49 among the 4 networks. And NBC had a rerun of Dateline from 9 to 10 p.m. doing in 0.5, and the 8 to 9 p.m. hour did a 0.6, so SmackDown was in last place among first-run programming in 18 to 49 and overall. The lowest rated first-run show besides SmackDown did 4,825,000 viewers, or more than double what SmackDown did. SmackDown did tie for first in 18-34, finish last in 25-54, tie for first in males 18-49 and finish last in 50+. Total Bellas on April 9th did 454,000 viewers and a 0.20 in 18-49. The show was down 19.4% from last week's season opener in overall viewers and down 20.0% in 18-49. The Keeping Up with the Kardashians lead-in did 912,000, which was down 16.6% from last week. Total Bellas did a 0.11 in 12-17, down 15.4%, 0.16 in 18-34, down 20.0%, 0.24 in 35-49, down 20.0%, and 0.14 in 50+, down 17.6%. The audience was 34.1% male in 18-49 and 25.1% male in 12-17. We've got more details on the April 8th head-to-head, which was the first show in 2020 that NXT had more viewers, by 400, although really that's a tie. NXT had 692,900 viewers and AEW had 692,500 viewers, although AEW had 331,100 viewers in 18-49 to 242,100 for NXT. AEW had 1.34 viewers per home, under their usual level, and SmackDown beat it out for the most viewers per home of any of the shows this past week. The difference was the first quarter, and a lot of this was the lead-in. At 7:55 p.m. the USA Network had 986,000 viewers for NCIS, which is now a big help to the show's first quarter, and 228,000 in 18-49. TNT had 617,000 viewers and 242,000 in 18-49 as its lead-in. In the first quarter, AEW had 741,000 viewers, 100,000 in 18-34 and 253,000 in 35-49 with a Jake Roberts interview, a Lance Archer squash, and the beginning of Hikaru Shida vs. Britt Baker. NXT had 842,000 viewers, 99,000 in 18-34 and 182,000 in 35-49 with the women's ladder match with Chelsea Green, Io Shirai, Dakota Kai, Tegan Nox, Candice LeRae, and Mia Yim. In the second quarter, AEW lost 40,000 viewers overall, 14,000 in 18-34 and 18,000 in 35-49 with Baker vs. Shida, and a backstage skit with Kenny Omega, Michael Nakazawa, Best Friends, and Orange Cassidy. NXT lost 100,000 viewers, 18,000 in 18-34 but stayed even in 35-49 with the ending of the ladder match. In the third quarter, AEW went ahead 665,000 to 664,000, so really a dead heat. AEW lost 36,000 viewers, but gained 13,000 in 18-34 and lost 1,000 in 35-49 with the top 5 rankings and promotional work for the Jon Moxley vs. Jake Hager match next week. NXT lost 78,000 viewers, including 6,000 in 18-34 and 18,000 in 35-49 with Finn Balor vs. Alexander Wolf and a Balor promo. In the fourth quarter, AEW gained 36,000 viewers, but lost 3,000 in 18-49 and gained 5,000 in 35-49. That had a package for the Cody vs. Shawn Spears match and the beginning of Kenny Omega and Michael Nakazawa vs. Trent and Chuck Taylor. NXT lost 28,000 viewers, including 14,000 in 18-34 and 5,000 in 35-49 with Rinku and Saurabh vs. Matt Martel and Chase Parker. In the fifth quarter, AEW gained 37,000 viewers, including 6,000 in 18-34 and 25,000 in 35-49 with Omega and Nakazawa vs. Best Friends. NXT gained 60,000 viewers, including 25,000 in 18-34 and lost 7,000 in 35-49 for Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley promos, and the beginning of Tommaso Ciampa vs. Johnny Gargano. In the sixth quarter, AEW lost 74,000 viewers, including 20,000 in 18-34 and 18,000 in 35-49 with more build for Moxley vs. Hager, a Matt Hardy interview and a Brody Lee squash. NXT lost 22,000 viewers, including 7,000 in 18-34 but gained 6,000 in 35-49 for more of Gargano vs. Ciampa. In the seventh quarter, AEW gained 16,000 viewers but lost 8,000 in 18-34 and 9,000 in 35-49 for the first half of Cody vs. Spears. NXT continued with Gargano vs. Ciampa and lost 25,000 viewers, including losing 4,000 in 18-34 and losing 3,000 in 35-49. The final quarter saw AEW lost 30,000 viewers, 4,018 to 34 and 5,035 to 49 for the ending of Cody vs. Spears. NXT lost 9,000 viewers but gained 7,018 to 34 and lost 8,035 to 49 for the ending of Gargano vs. Ciampa. AEW won 5 of 8 quarters in total viewers and all 8 in the key demo. In 18 to 34, the last 30 minutes saw NXT win in 18 to 34 but lost in 35 to 49. Actual final quarter numbers were 650,000 for AEW with 70,000 in 18 to 34 and 232,000 in 35 to 49. NXT had 640,000 viewers with 82,000 18 to 34 and 147,000 in 35 to 49.